Hey there, guys. So, in this video, I want to really go into detail about sort of the realization of being gay and understanding how to learn how to really accept yourself and understand yourself more. Now, I do want to share a little bit more about my story and sort of coming into the realization of knowing that I'm different. And I want to break down a few different things that I think will help in a lot of ways, especially if you're going through this journey yourself. Because I know I have seen a lot of comments with people who have had sort of similar, aspects of really closing themselves off and preventing themselves from really being open in a lot of ways. So, in this video, I want to really discuss that more into detail about the realization of being gay and really the realization of your sexuality and understanding your identity more. And I think the more that we think about this, the more that it's going to really help us as we go throughout our journey. And I know that everybody is at different stages in their life to where they feel that they can be open and they can be honest. And I understand with a lot of people that it is not easy to go through the process of that because of all of the stress that it brings and all of the emotions and just the what seems like barriers, the societal barriers. And, even though we live in a modern time, it still is not easy to go through the process of really being open with yourself. So, what I want to do is really give a little bit more insight on my story and sort of why being open is a big deal with me and, really understanding and breaking down the many key concepts of how I realized, I was gay or I am gay. So, the first thing I want to discuss is, like I mentioned, whenever I was 13 is when I came out. However, I do remember multiple times when I was younger um, where I sort of had that notion of being different. So, like, like you've probably heard the story of whenever you go to like the underwear aisle at a store. I did have that same experience. Now, I'm not saying that if you had that experience, that would necessarily be an indicator, but usually if you are somebody who really is like mesmerized by that, mesmerized by the underwear packages, that's usually, a clear indicator of, you know, you're different in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of things, in my childhood that I can point at and really look at and be like, yeah, I can see a lot of, dots connecting in a lot of ways. And keep in mind too, another thing I want to mention is when you are coming to understand yourself, don't feel like you have to be like, there's this whole idea of, stereotypes when it comes to sexuality in a lot of ways. You need to focus on being you regardless. You do not have to have identical interests as everybody else. All you need to focus on is being yourself, having your own interest, and, you know, embracing that. So that's one thing that I do want to mention in advance. Um, just because your interest, may not be what is considered, you know, gay, doesn't really affect you. You have to focus on being yourself at all times. Like with me and my personality, there's kind of a mix of both masculine and feminine interest. That's kind of how I am. I one thing with me is I grew up around video games. Video games is a very big thing with me, although it has become more both, both genders, or, it's not necessarily, all a masculine type of, sort of interest anymore when it comes to video games, because video games is more open than it was um, really in the past. But that's usually considered a more masculine interest. And that was always one interest I enjoyed. You know, that's like with, with different types of movies. There be maybe movies that I like that are considered more masculine, and there's movies that I like that are more feminine in nature. And, the same, like, when it comes with music, like, what I'm trying to say here is that being yourself is all about embracing all of the different sides of yourself and understanding that more, and just really coming into, just that acceptance. So just know that your interests don't have to be stereotypical in a lot of ways. So, and it's okay. It's okay if you have more feminine interests. That's okay too. But what I'm trying to really go across is, when it comes to this idea of sexuality, I think it's, many people usually equate it specifically with the sexual side of things, which of course it is. There is, that, sort of concept that's around it, because that's what it's called, sexuality. But there is a little bit more to it than I think, a lot of people realize when it comes to knowing that you are different in how you feel. One thing, and I think I had touched on this in a video before, but one thing that I had noticed, when I really, looking back at everything, and when I was coming out this time again, is when I noticed, I started to look back at a lot of, some of the things that all of my memories from the past. And I started to think about those little sort of aha moments that kind of happened. And like I mentioned, there was a time where, I had a really close friend. Of course, I'm going to keep this discreet. I had a close friend, and there was something about him that I was really interested in, and I didn't understand it at the time, and when I was still in high school, I think, at the time. But I just remember that there was something about him, like, that I was drawn to. And again, this wasn't just the aspect of it being sexual. It was still sort of this sort of emotional connection. And of course, this guy was straight, but there was a connection that I had with him. And I just remember I would really want to see him again. Like, I was having that really close emotional connection. And it was more than just, thinking, about a friend. It was like it was like longing to be with somebody. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people miss, is that it is not necessarily, your overall attraction to somebody who is of, the same sex, but it is about having that emotional and sort of really mental connection with somebody. That is another part of it that I think a lot of people forget. And I started to notice that I had that. That's just like here recently with the guy that I've been talking to. I feel that again, it's that emotional connection. You feel that longing for someone, and that's how you know that's how you understand it. But what's really hard is the way that, of course, society frames things, and really makes it to where so many people have to shut themselves off from their true feelings. And I've heard stories from a lot of people. I've had so many different messages and comments talking about, the same sort of experiences. And again, I think what we forget is that our sexuality is more than just the sexual aspect of things. It is how we connect with somebody. We are going to connect with somebody, if it's just like if somebody is straight. That's like I was reading something on the internet like not too long ago where somebody was asking whether like tell me what's the difference between like from like there was somebody asking a question saying from a straight perspective, because I'm trying to understand from a straight perspective what it feels like for somebody to be gay, and they were asking that question. And I know somebody had said that it's the same, it's that feeling of longing for someone, it's that feeling of the butterflies, it's all of those different emotions that you feel. And that's the same way that I felt, again, like here recently. This guy I was talking to, we had had a couple of dates, and I'm somebody who tries to be cautious, cautiously optimistic, I guess. And I try not to, because I'm not that, like, I've not had that many relationships. Um, and I try to be somebody who's not really gets overly attached, but I feel like I'm that person sometimes, and I try to not be that type of person, because I know it can be annoying to some people, but I can kind of get that sort of attachment. And again, it's only happened with guys. I only have that feeling when, I've had dates with guys and I've been with guys, and there's just this emotional longing that I have. And, that's really looking back at it, like I said, with that experience when I was younger, it solidifies things. It makes me think, okay, yeah, this is real. This is who I am. And the reason why I've had to go through so much anxiety and depression is because I've tried to suppress so much of who I actually am. And, you know, that's, it's not a good thing to do. We have to get out of that. And I know, again, I know how some people have that, sort of, they don't want to be out because it is hard. It's hard. It's been hard for me. It's been the hardest thing that I've ever done, ever. But I think it's really brought you know, a lot of peace in a lot of ways. Even though it's been hard, it really has helped me understand myself better. And also at the same time, it's allowed me to help others in that same, boat. Because again, like my whole content with fitness, the reason why fitness has been a big thing with me, and why I think talking about this alongside fitness, is because our health is much more than just one single element. Like with fitness, fitness is all about self improvement. And the same can go with, understanding ourselves on a deeper level mentally, related to our sexuality. If we suppress something like that and we shut that off, it affects our health in a lot of ways. It affects our mental health, which is a big thing with me. I've had to go through a lot of depression, anxiety throughout the years, in my life, my 30 years of life. And, when you close something off like that, that is crucial, that is part of your personality, just to put on a face for everybody else, it does not, you're going to live a life of regret down the road. And so, what I'm trying to say with this is when you come to that realization, take time to really reflect on your life. Embrace your interests, embrace what makes you unique and what you really find, that interests you the most. I've always been big with art. I love art, I love movies, as you can see. I'm a very creative person in a lot of ways. Of course, I like video games, which you can see my Doom banner here, and I like horror movies. So, I have a ton of different interests, and that's just who I am. This has been my personality. I've always been that type of person. And just because society doesn't accept one thing of me, but I can embrace everything else, that's not a life, you know, that's not how you live life. You have to embrace every part of yourself that is, of course, where you live an open life. And that's like what I mentioned with, the rainbow here, the rainbow flag, and the reason why I'm so passionate about showing that off, because it's become a symbol of what I've went through. It's become a symbol of all of these struggles and all of the beautiful moments that I went through. And, it's to really show that visibility to others as well, that you can do this, that you have support around you to help you through this process, because it's not easy. It's a hard process, and I think it does get better, but I think at the same time you get stronger, basically. And so, again, guys, thank you for your time. I really wanted to discuss this, and I hope that it helps in a lot of ways. I want to continue to talk about these topics. There's some new books that I've been reading here lately that I may discuss in the future and really go through. I may even start to discuss, some of the movies that I have, related to LGBTQ issues, and really, expanding upon that, and maybe video games as well. But I enjoy doing this, guys. I really appreciate this. Uh, Again, I'm here for you, and I appreciate all the comments and messages that you guys have given me. So, thank you guys so much for the encouragement and the support.